Good evening, everybody. My name is Zoroastrian, and in this video, I want to make a critic of the man that used to live in 12th century called Al-Ghazali, famous as Al-Ghazali. There's a lot of information to be presented about the events surrounding this man's life, but I'm gonna pack as much as I can in a concise manner as much as possible. To begin with, what inspired me to write, make a video about this man was the videos that I watched about multiple supposedly Muslim YouTubers or Muslim leaders, I would say, people who try to promote and preach the message of Islam on YouTube. Namely, this man, his name is Hamza Yusuf. He does a great job of, in a, at least what appears to me, a very, I would say, spiritual way, very meditative way, trying to portray this religion. That's funny, of course, the people who always are involved in this business of deceit manage to get on top. People who fight and try to deliver something that is truthful and harsh, nobody wants to listen to them and they don't gain any followers. That's another story, but simple said. So yes, that's what inspired me as a Persian, knowing about the subject and being somewhat familiar with this subject, the history of Iran, and particularly the events surrounding the Arab-Persian conflicts and wars and genocides done by the Muslims to the natives of Iran. I wanted to make the world aware of what this really is about and what this man really stood about. So his full name is Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali, and he was born like 1058 and he dies surrounding age of basically 1111. So he was living for the most part of his life in the 11th century. Let's focus on Al-Ghazali. So to give you a sense of the context that was happening at the time of Al-Ghazali, now you have this movements of the Ismaili movements, the man called Hassan Sabbah. This is a man who had his fortress in basically northern Iran called Alamut, and he would manage to have this clan of followers who would be willing to die for him and his cause, and their job was to basically create chaos in the minds and hearts of the rulers, being the local rulers, governors, or worse, even worse, the Sultan, the Seljuk Sultan, basically to try to get them to follow their ways and stop their opposition to the Ismaili Shia version of Islam. Now you have at the same time the growth of multiple other non-Islamic causes. We're talking about the man who actually, funny enough, his name is Yaqub Lays. He's actually not being a native speaker of Persian at his time, well, surrounding his time, not exactly his time. It's interesting that he leads a very mass rebellion against the Caliphate, the Abbasids, actually, and causes a lot of turmoil. And he's not just the only one. We have the Ghaznavids, who are also in the close vicinity of the birthplace of Ghazali. A lot of these movements actually formed in the area of called the Greater Khorasan, which is the north of Iran. And this area in particular was a very uh, potent threat to the Abbasids, because they were never able, for many different reasons, that is, primarily speaking, these mountains of Zagros, this massive array of the harsh basically topography that made it very difficult for the Arabs to cross over and to manage to invade the Khorasan area. Basically, it was the groundwork of the opposition throughout the many phases, from the very beginning of the Arab invasion of Persia, the Muslim Arab invasion of Persia, um, to the many centuries later, that were very indigenous movements trying to subdue the caliphate rule and try to push them back to their native Saudi Arabia, or the newly developed Baghdad, capital of the caliphates. So what Ghazali does at this time, being actually accepted to the court of the Seljuks, he's in task with trying to come up with these doctrines that in multiple directions is about to establish the ideology, or rather that is to upgrade the Islamic ideology to be a potent, rivalable um, force against these new ideologies, or the ones that are in a very pragmatic or rather logical manner, they're really opposing this rule. Many of you perhaps have heard the Islamic Golden Age, which refers to the same vicinity of time frame, that is, from the 800 Common Era BC. Excuse me, I'm sorry, 800 after Christ to the 1400 is the Islamic Golden Age, which actually had nothing to do with Islam. The people who uh, started this golden scientific age were actually Persians, who, for the most part, if not entirely, they were non-believers. And actually they gained their scientific gains and making breakthroughs in their medical research and scientific research was really their non-belief, and rather trying to question and trying to come up with ways that were totally in opposition of the teachings of Islam or any other Abrahamic religion. So uh, so Al-Ghazali has a very, very seriously harsh task to do. And he realizes that, matter of fact, what is really fueling the Shia opposition in Iran is really the native Persian opposition to the um, basically the Muslim and the Caliphate rule. That is the Seljuks, who were, to begin with, they're nomadic tribes who have finally reached Persia and taken advantage of the volatile and vulnerability, susceptibility of the Persian plateau, Iranian plateau. They're managed to gain power and rising a political ladder, to get in on top of the political ladder. So what he does, primarily speaking, is to go against the Zoroastrian ideology. That is one of the things that he does, and trying to putting out everything that has to do with the Persian costumes, um, Persian ideology, the culture, the language. Language is a key to the learning of your heritage. your past. Without it, it's like having a mansion that, because you just don't have the key, you have no access, and you don't have the luxury of enjoying this mansion. Um, I have done a translation here, a segment from Al-Ghazali's book, uh, Alchemistry of Happiness, or Kimyaya Saadat, if you will, in Persian, that it may speak for itself and show the diabolic nature of this man, and why indeed somebody like this people, these Muslim leaders, they really identify with him. If you have such a diabolic person that betrays his own uh, heritage and actually argues for the cause of the genocidal forces of the enemy, the people who, not necessarily by the power of virtue, but primarily by the political climate and also the backing of the Romans, managed to defeat the Persians. He writes such verses. It may speak for itself, and I want to uh, go through it and try to explain each segments as well. It might make sense. So he goes on saying that it must be forbidden to sell masks for children during the day of celebration, and also sale of toy swords and shields for Nowruz. Now, Nowruz, in case you're not familiar with, is the Persian New Year holiday, which actually goes by far even beyond the time of the Zarathustra. It's a very old tradition. So what he does is say here is basically saying that the, the shopkeepers, the people should not be selling means of celebration, celebrating Nowruz, that is, for children, buying these toys to play around and celebrate in some ways, whatever they could, in spite of the rules that were against the Zoroastrians um, um, celebrations, massive persecutions that were enforced upon the Zoroastrians at a time and continued on, really. The Zoroastrian chant is haram and prohibited by Sharia law. It is haram and prohibited on those who chant these celebrations. So he calls out those people who celebrate directly, very explicit message, no leaving any room for saying that, hey, I'm trying to be prudent here, not to offend anybody. No. He wants to make it clear that he is really there. He wants to really show that we have no mercy upon you. Watch out. Your real solution is really conversion. You can convert to Islam, and not be persecuted any further, or if not, we will in some ways, whether by force or by suffering, make your life difficult and impossible rather. Accordingly, Nowruz and Saturn must be destroyed. So he says that what I'm really trying to say is that I'm not just saying that these means of celebration should be destroyed, but the celebration itself. Very explicit. This is a man that's praised by the Muslims, and now, as a matter of fact, is in the very time that we're talking about, in the 21st century, year 2022. How advanced our civilization has this, that these people, instead of at least admitting to what had been happening and what had been done, rather, they actually celebrate these figures and veneer somebody like Ghazali. Now, Sadeh is another Persian celebration. It has a lot to do with the creation of fire, the invention of fire, or creation of fire. This itself has so many different versions of stories behind it. I'm not going to go into detail that, but simple said, Sadeh and Nowruz are two of the, rather than again, they're not necessarily even Zoroastrian celebrations. They're actually way back prior to in advance of Zarathustra's message. Ghazali goes on saying that a number of previous scholars have proposed to require citizens to fast on such day as to blur and weaken Nowruz. But this also is wrong because people will remember Nowruz as a day of fast. Yes, he's right. So many, if you will, supposed scholars prior to him rather try to be prudent and instead of trying to, in a forcible, outright ferocious manner going against the Persian ideologies or Iranian ideologies, they try to be like, you know what, let's just find some other ways to try to at least blur it, at least, our we at least we achieve something, at least the meaning gets lost here, so maybe at least people don't remember what happened. We can just have people identify Nowruz as celebration being associated with a day of fasting, for example. And he says that this idea is also no good. It's not something that I'm looking forward to. He goes on saying that we must implement actions that lead to destruction of Nowruz, so no one ever will remember such name. So I think this really speaks for itself, how much of a goodwill somebody like Hamza Yusuf or these other people who, in a very elegant and eloquent tone, try to present the message of Ghazali and also Islam really mean. Yes, this is really the true nature of Ghazali. He spent a good chunk of his life writing multiple books to fight the any direction, anything that has to do with the Iranian culture, Iranian customs, religion, and background, anything that you may identify with the certain nation, and outright favoring and propagating in favor of this fabricated religion called Islam.